Alright guys, tonight we're gonna be reacting to Impact. Why doesn't Luka's impact match his production? It's a very good question because he is in the MVP race, averaging damn near a 34 point triple double. I think he's 0.2 assists off of averaging 10 assists, and he's for sure 9 rebounds. So he's almost a triple double while also scoring on average 34 points. So a lot of people think he's the MVP, but right now the front runner is Nikola Jokic, and I think odds is like crazy on his side, like minus 800 to win the award. So I think this was made to show why maybe the advanced metrics don't favor Luka Doncic compared to Jokic in this day and age, because it seems like Luka can't do anything to get this MVP. He's for sure having the best season of his career, so those are like some good reasons for why he should win MVP. I don't know why I'm saying all this, but this will help to either destroy my point, make my point, or do nothing to my point at all. So let's get right into it here. Let's see.
Turn on any Mavs game lately, and you're probably going to see Luka Doncic put on a show. He systematically targets vulnerable defenders in pick and roll, then slowly moves to a sweet spot before shooting over a smaller defender. Then he comes down and hits the brakes, fake step back, double hezzy, power to get in the paint, and finish. Next time he brings it up the center in pick and roll, gets the switch, and feathers in the perfect pass to the mismatch. What about a little isolation clear out, wait for the double team, skip it to the open shooter for a 3-ball, or come down in transition, chisel through a smaller defender for a little up fake and step through, maybe get the center on a switch, start dancing with that dribble to drop a step back on his head, or take that center into the post to set up the Michael Jordan up and under footwork, and that's just in the first 6 minutes of the game. The man is averaging 34 points and 10 assists per night. That's only been done once, and the Mavs offense is in the 85th percentile when he's on the floor. So he's the walking embodiment of a one-man offense. But there's a very weird phenomenon with Luka that's more mysterious than the 3-body problem. If he's such a great player, why do his teams barely change when he goes to the bench? In a single season, some great players will have negative on-offs, meaning their team will be worse when they are on the court compared to when they are off the court. But in the long run, great players have a large positive impact. In the play-by-play era, 29 players have finished in the top 5 in MVP more than once. Every single one of those players has a big plus-minus footprint over a 5-year sample. Allen Iverson's teams outscored opponents by 4 points every 48 minutes because he improved them by 7 points per 48 during his best 5-year period. Kawhi Leonard improved his teams by nearly 8 points per 48, but they were a whopping plus 11 with him on the floor, so he was making a really good team great. In that sense, the very best player...
I was wondering who that was in the corner. It's Curry. LeBron is up there. So that is on-off. He's a plus, 15? On the court, and his team is a minus 11 when he's off. Same for Kawhi here, except Kawhi's a plus 8, and his team's a minus 11 when he's off the court. Curry's on-off is just off the charts. I just love how Thinking Basketball makes these charts. Like, you know, he really is underrated. Well, not really underrated because NBA hired him to have his own episodes on their YouTube channel. I think I saw one recently about Jalen Brunson. So he is making big moves. He did also popularize the term heliocentric offense. So yeah, you can see because a lot of people use it now, that term, and he's the one who, I don't know if he created the term, but I know for sure he popularized it. So yeah, big ups to this guy. Like, he knows basketball for sure, for sure.
Players are in the upper right of this graph. They improve good teams by a lot. 19 of them have an on-off of at least plus 10 across their best 5-year stretch. And this is the Luka mystery, because Doncic's teams aren't that good with him on the floor, yet he barely improves them when he plays. This is really confusing, because a mega scorer who carves up teams with his passing should be hard to replace, and yet that hasn't been the case during his career. So what is going on here? Maybe it's his defense. If all that brilliance is on the offensive end, maybe the defense is giving back a ton of his impact. He definitely struggles to contain quicker players in space. His lateral movement has been an issue since his rookie year, so he can get a little...
That's like the one issue with him. I mean, I don't know if it's just his quickness or more so his effort, because I feel like his build isn't too bad, at least to stay somewhat in front of people. Because if you see Jokic, like, before, like, 2-3 years ago, he was also like this, but he for sure didn't give as much effort, and his positioning was always off. And that's kind of where Luka is, from what I'm seeing, in his defensive play style. He doesn't give enough effort, and he's positioned always off, so he just gets blitzed by faster players. He needs to be in a space where he can close out on players that are, you know, at the three-point line, but be able to not get driven by every single time. Like, you're gonna get driven by even if you're the best defender, or get like crazy three-point shots scored on you, but you gotta stay in front of them, make it tough, be a presence, and you're good. You did your job, at least on that end, the defensive end. Yeah.
Little off balance out there. Although against weaker offensive players, some of his hopping and sliding will sufficiently slow them down. So he's not a complete pushover there. This might be his best defensive possession out on the perimeter that I've seen from him this season. And that's a slightly different skill than defending the pick and roll, where he can get out of position dealing with shifty guards coming downhill at him. He's too small to really drop back, and up at the screen he's vulnerable to changes of direction like this. So teams will target him at times in the pick and roll game and challenge that lack of agility on the outside. He can also struggle to get around picks because of this, both on the ball and when he's chasing around shooters. He sort of loses contact with the deadly Michael Porter Jr. here, and then doesn't have the agility to recover. Sometimes there's a lapse in focus out there. It's not chronic, but it's enough that you'll find games with multiple plays like these two against Miami in the first quarter. And there's kind of a laziness to his defense at times. He switches here, but doesn't really engage with the cutter, and it's a dunk. And there are also occasions where he hangs around after an empty trip and doesn't really hustle back in transition. And that can lead to open shots, or worse, just
yeah, he just seems unmotivated after he missed his shot. He needs to go back on the other end, even if you're not, or you missed, but start from there, moving to the other end of the court, because you already know you're not as quick, and you already have issues on the defensive end, because now if you're slower at getting to the other end of the other end than the team that's coming down the court, then your teammates are going to have to guard a 4v5 by default, and that's just not going to work in today's NBA, who have like sharpshooters at every corner of the court.
Complete and total breakdowns where no one ever stops the ball. One thing he does do pretty well is communicate. He tells his teammate to help so he can slide down, although he's a little slow getting around that screen to the shooter. And this one's a very Luka possession where Kyrie Irving forgets to rotate, so Luka tells him to get out there, and in theory Luka should be moving in unison with Kyrie, but he's generally a pretty low motor defender. Although on the offensive rebound, he is tall enough to get his hands on the ball from behind and dislodge Jokic. Doncic's size is really interesting because he's a good 6'7", but he plays smaller around the basket. So his height doesn't always help when he rotates onto big men or even protect the rim, because he lacks that vertical pop to challenge other players up near the basket. But he's usually in the right position, and he's at least big enough to deter someone like Al Horford when he's early like that. So in this sense, there's some value to his height, because he's at least an extra big body sitting in the paint. Here's a good example where Dallas wants to trap Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Luka doesn't instantly recover, but he floats to a good spot and then saves a layup with his size. This time he's on the weak side off ball, so he needs to worry about his own man and the shooter at the top. Ends up playing the passing lane, but he's just not quick enough to completely get there and force the turnover. But in general, there's decent value in communicating with teammates, knowing where to be, and understanding his team's scheme while generally reading what offenses are trying to do out there at a fairly high level. So I do think his defense is chipping away at some of his overall impact, but it doesn't look like it's such a big problem that it would explain his mysteriously underwhelming plus-minus numbers. What about his off-ball game, where he can be idle when he doesn't have the basketball, just standing around behind the three-point line while Kyrie Irving takes the offensive reins?
Ball watching is his biggest problem. I swear, if he could just be engaged more often, he could be like even better. I mean, he's already so good. Like, he's arguably the MVP right now. He's like a top 3 player in the NBA. I mean, these are just small things he could fix to solidify himself as the best player in the NBA and get his team over the hump, because he is an issue on that end. He is targeted, just like Thinking Basketball said. He is targeted on that end because he is a low motor defensive player. So, and ball watching is one of the main reasons that he's bad on that end. He needs to stay engaged. Simple.
Now, Luka's usually quarterbacking the offense, so this is a smaller part of the story, but there are two subtle things happening here. First, he's giving back some value compared to a more dangerous off-ball player who strains defenses with movement. This is one of the few possessions all year he backcuts his defender into the lane to score. And we know from players like Steph Curry or Lauri Markkanen how dynamic movement really strains defenses. For example, you'll rarely see Luka work off a simple screen here for a layup or to tie defenders into knots. Instead, he passively walks through them a lot. And I'd love to see him cut more. He gives it up here, but a cut down the middle of the floor really stresses Dillon Brooks, because he can't easily rotate out to the three-point shooter, and this play ends up in an out-of-bounds turnover. I think Luka not backcutting his defenders a lot also has to do with a lack of vertical finishing. He's crafty around the basket, but someone like LeBron James can cut into traffic because he's such an aerial threat. In the same vein, Luka sets idle screens. He's not looking to roll or sprint into a shot from them. He's really looking to catch it and go to work against a switch in isolation. Even with Kyrie Irving, he's not interested in screening and rolling into space because that's not really his game. We're methodically taking apart a mismatch.
Like, his team is just ball watching. They're not getting any movement, so they're going to get cold. This happens to mostly ISO heavy teams, which in this case they have two players that have very ISO heavy game styles. So it can work and it can fail if they play a good defense with a good coach. So we'll see in the playoffs. It's coming around in like a month. So
match in isolation is very much his game. Even on his off-ball actions, he's often playing to catch it in a sweet spot. He has a step on his defender here, but waits for him to catch up so he can instead play out of isolation in the middle of the floor. This is subtle, but the lack of movement makes it hard to interact with other star teammates when they initiate. It makes the offense more of a your turn, my turn kind of thing than something interactive and multiplicative. And of course, that offense is very good because Luka is an incredible passer and scorer off his pet actions.
Threes this year, fly-by closeout, pump fake. Yeah, baby!
Yeah, baby is right. According to Second Spectrum tracking, he's in the top 5 in isolation efficiency and pick and roll efficiency in the NBA. And that's why Dallas has a 122 offensive rating with him on the
Through the legs. 122 offensive rating is one of the better offenses in the league, too.
floor. But Kyrie Irving is in the top 40 in both categories, so when he's out there without Luka, the Mavs also have a 122 offensive rating. When Luka goes to the bench, they can run similar sets through Irving with similar results. And
Jesus,
the Mavs
man,
have actually
these guys be dunking it like they're trying to, like... I can't
run
even say.
really successful offense
With so much
without
passion,
Luka
I just
during
use
his
it, but-
prime because they usually have another good offensive initiator. In Jalen Brunson's last 2 seasons, the Mavs offense was just 2 points worse when Luka went to the bench, with the budding Brunson running the ship. So a big part of Luka's on-off numbers are probably because his sidekicks are also ball-dominant guards themselves. At the same time, those guards are optimized when Luka doesn't have the ball, and when he's
Bang.
idling away from the ball, he might not even be as useful as a more active role player.
Good ball
So,
movement.
yes, you can surround Doncic with role players, and he is a one-man offense, where doing everything possession after possession gives him unrivaled stats and
good
is
court vision.
jaw-droppingly impressive to watch. But those offenses don't seem to get much better when you add another star guard because there's redundancy. Another thought is that this all changes in the playoffs against better competition. And sure enough, Luka's teams are dead even when he's played in the postseason, which is nearly 9 points better than when he was on the bench for 445 minutes. We also excluded James Harden from this graphic earlier because he used to have the smallest on-off of the MVPs until Luka. That's noteworthy because Harden played an incredibly similar style. He was a big guard, struggled defensively, idled away from the ball, and absolutely destroyed teams in pick and roll and isolation, leading to mega box score production. Harden has played a ton in the playoffs, and despite his underwhelming regular season plus-minus, he has one of the biggest improvements we've seen in playoff on-off. Only that improvement comes from his OKC years, where he was less ball dominant. If we look at his playoff performance from his best regular seasons in Houston, Harden's teams were 8 points better with him on the floor in the postseason, which is strong, but not much different from his regular season.
So, is thinking basketball saying Luka isn't impactful? I mean, you know, I'm being a little harsh. He's impactful. It's just, I guess the advanced stats show, maybe not advanced, but the on-off stats don't show it to be that, because he has a good second option like Kyrie, who has been playing, what, amazing 25, 5, and 5 on 50, 40, 90. So he has a good second option that can run with the bench unit, or when he's not even just playing the game and playing with the rest of the starters, and Luka's sitting on the bench, he just runs the offense just really well. So he just has a good team now, and that's good, you know. Before, I mean, also when Jalen Brunson was there, Jalen Brunson was playing really well. Not as well as he's been doing this year. Bro's been having a crazy year this year on the Knicks, but he was getting to that level. So obviously when Luka's not playing and Jalen Brunson or Kyrie were, the numbers will show not much of a difference. But there are players like Curry and LeBron. You can see that, like, their on-off numbers are off the charts. Their impact is just, you can see it visually, and the stats back it up as well, which is always helpful.
An impact. Luka's box score stats in the playoffs are slightly better than Harden's, and it's clear his style of mismatch hunting is hard to stop in the second season. So maybe he's just inherently more valuable in the playoffs. Finally, I think the last factor is, yes, it's a 5-year sample, but Luka's improved as a player in that sample. His jump in three-point shooting this season has added another mini level to his offense. His defense has improved recently, and even his conditioning has ebbed and flowed over the years. Sure enough, his plus-minus stats look more respectable in the last 2 seasons, and we see a slightly different story when we look at the full games that he's missed. Back in the Brunson-Porzingis years, Doncic missed 42 games where Tim Hardaway Jr. played, and in those games, the Mavs were actually better without him. But if we look at a slightly different set of games where, say, Dorian Finney-Smith played, the Mavs went from a 45-win team without Luka to a 52-win team with him. And in the last 2 seasons, he's missed 21 games where Hardaway played, and the Mavs were a 35-win team without him, but with him they've played at a 50-win pace, which is more in line with the impact we expect from an MVP-level player. And
he is saying that with Tim Hardaway Jr., without Tim Hardaway Jr., when he has Kyrie now, so...
Remember, the whole reason why his plus-minus stats are such a mystery in the first place is because he looks superhuman at times. He might be the best primary read pick-and-roll passer in NBA history, hitting his roll man from the top, hitting his roll man on lobs coming down the lane, or hitting his roll man with pocket passes through the middle. And then when you start sending extra defenders to stop that, he slings it all over the floor like he's throwing a frisbee around with his friends. So traditional coverages are at the mercy of his teammates attacking closeouts or shooting threes.
Crazy pass.
We noted earlier that he wasn't an explosive finisher, but when he has the ball, he just slowly moves wherever he wants because he is the master of tempo, keeping a defender on his hip and grinding his way deep into the paint. This is Luka's superpower, a tight dribble, broad frame, and enough strength to ride oblique angles to the rim at his own pace. Aaron Nesmith crowds him coming around a pick on this play, and Luka just keeps the dribble alive right in front of him, crosses over to create an angle, and then he takes him into the paint before using his size to score. And this superpower is only activated with the ball, which might be why he doesn't fit incredibly well next to other ball-dominant stars. But it does look like that fit is a sizable explanation for his lackluster plus-minus stats, and relative to his insane offensive numbers, his defense is probably a factor too. Then again, maybe Luka's playoff numbers are more reflective of his actual impact, and we'll get a better taste of that in the future. So, even if we haven't completely solved this mystery yet, I've seen enough to call him one of the 20 or even 15 best offensive players in the history of the league. So maybe
crazy.
the real mystery isn't about his plus-minus, it's how many better offensive players will have ever played when Luka's career is all said and done. To support this channel, check out...
Oh, it seems that's the video. So basically, the overall question is Luka Doncic the most impactful player in the NBA right now? Or is it someone else? Put it in the comments down below. That is the video for today.